Today's episode of the Get Your Comic On podcast may contain mild spoilers for the movies, shows, comic books, and games that we're discussing. And, if you're lucky, there might be some PG-13 language. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hey super friends, my name is Neil and welcome to this very special mini edition of the Get Your Comic On podcast. I am here today to present a very cool interview I got to do recently with a writer who I've admired for a very, very long time. You may know them from Boom Studios' House of Slaughter, or from Dark Horse's The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos, currently working on one of the Green Lantern books at DC, and the book that we are going to talk about today, which is Batgirl. I am, of course, talking about the absolutely wonderful, brilliant Tate Brombal, who has been masterminding a whole host of really cool comic books across the spectrum for the last few years. Tate's first issue of Batgirl released in November, and this is a brand new series which features Cassandra Cain's Batgirl, putting her in the spotlight in her first solo series for almost 2 decades, believe it or not. The second issue of Batgirl will be hitting comic book stores and digital platforms on December the 4th, but ahead of that I had a chance to sit down with Tate for an exclusive chat, just talking about getting into the mindset of Cass, finding a way to explore her relationship with her mother, and most importantly, what fans can expect after what is an explosive second issue of the series. So, before I give you any of my thoughts on issue 2, why don't you have a listen to what happened when I sat down with Tate for a little one-on-one, potentially mildly spoilery chat about issue 2 of Batgirl. Okay, so Batgirl. I can't even tell you how excited I am to talk about this. There was a moment where when this series was announced, I was like, I think I'm going to reach out because I really want to talk to him about this. It's
Cool.
before we dive into issue 2, I wanted to just talk about issue 1. How are you feeling now that it's out in the world?
Um, a lot of things, but mostly, honestly, a lot of good things. The reception was just kind of more than I expected.
Yeah.
I know the fan base, like Cass has such a huge fan base. I'm part of that fan base, so I understand people have like wanted Cass-centric stories for literal decades at this point. So I knew it would be big and I knew people would be excited, which is kind of nerve-wracking because
Yeah.
when like a character is loved that much and people hold that character so dearly,
Yeah.
there is that fear of like letting them down or like not getting the character right or kind of messing things up. But I really approached it with like, I know this character, I love this character, what's like, and I know the story I want to tell with Cass and with Lady Shiva specifically. So I'm just like holding true to that. And the reception was really warm. So it felt nice. It was great.
Like you said, the reception to the announcement was just huge, and the fact that it trended on
Mm,
Twitter and everyone was talking about it. And
yeah.
when I have conversations with people as well, and you ask the question of who would you like to see a series of, Cast just comes up again and again and again. Um,
Yeah.
but now that the book is out there and people have had chance to read the first issue and react to it and embrace you and the story you're trying to tell,
Mm.
does that take any pressure off, or does that actually kind of does it light a fire under you to show even more what you can do with her?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's not like I'm not doubting anything. It's
Yeah.
more just like, hey, how can I push this further? How can I like what is really connecting with readers? Like what like because there's so much
Mm.
I put in that first issue that I think a lot of only real like hardcore cast fans might even pick up on. But I was like, what is resonating with readers and like seeing how much people enjoyed like her internal dialogue and her narration and
Yes.
how the issue like I tried to shape the issue and the format of the series to like reflect how Cass views the world. So seeing
Yeah.
how people connected with that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to lean into that. I'm going to keep doing that and show cool ways that Cass sees the world differently from anyone else, and like that's what makes her the hero she is.
And she is such a unique character as well, because for people that may have not known her to begin with, when she was still very much a mute character, to now where she is able to communicate more, there
Mm,
aren't many characters like that. And I do think that you
yeah.
broke into that idea of using her in a monologue. It was just perfect right out of the gate. Like I felt like I'm reading Cass from page one straight away. But how did you, or how do you get into her mindset to do that?
Yeah, well, it helps. It's cool because comics are kind of the perfect medium for a character like that, just because it's obviously
Mm,
like a
yeah,
visual medium. So I can use the formalism like of comics to like really show her point of view. So using those inset panels of like what she's like directly looking at, and then letting like the cue of the narration to just be like, what is she reading? What is, and then kind of connecting it all to see what she takes away from those things. And I don't know how specifically I landed on that. Like I knew, so like the first page as it exists
yeah,
was always in my head from like the moment I pitched the series. I was like, the opening line is Shiva saying, "You know, I never wanted a daughter," and Cass
yeah.
coming back and saying, you talk like I wanted a mother." So I knew that's where it was going to start. And I don't know, I was on a walk or I was in a shower or I don't know. I was like, the internal monologue was going, like my mind was just thinking, and the four opening narration lines, which is like glance, touch, heartbeat, smile, like for some
Mm,
reason those four words came to me. It's like, what like what does that mean? And I knew it had to be in relation to Shiva, because they both can speak this language like through body movement alone. Like they can read it and they can speak to each other this way. So I was like, these are the four cues of Shiva trying to tell Cass something, that she actually does care for her. And of course Cass is not going to believe it. But that was kind of the part that, as soon as I landed on those inset panels and like queuing it up with like a narration beat for each one, I was like, I'm going to keep doing that throughout the issue and the book.
interesting. And then you kind of need that moment to reestablish their relationship as well, because it's been a while since we've seen the two of them kind of sharing a panel together. And
Yeah.
the way I've always sort of read them is it's like there's almost an unspoken kind of acknowledgement that there's the mother-daughter familial bond, but there's no warmth there between the two of them. It's kind of just a, I see you, I know who you are, but we don't have the kind of mother-daughter connection that other people might have. And I feel like that sort of
Yeah.
space between them is something you really dig into in issue two. I feel like having kind of
Mhm.
established it in issue one, issue two is now
Mhm.
like, right, let's dig into that space. And with the introduction of Barbell, who I absolutely love as a
Mhm.
character, adore her,
Yeah.
um, that it surprised me because it challenged Shiva's perception of Cass, which I wasn't sort of in my mind, that wasn't where we were quite going to go yet. And so I just wanted to ask about that. And was it important to sort of show that maybe there's some misjudgment on both parts when it comes to how Shiva perceives her mother, her daughter, sorry, but how Cass also perceives her mother? That it's kind of goes both ways, that they don't quite understand each other.
Yeah, I wanted to immediately also dive into that because Shiva thinks she knows Cass, because I
Yeah,
think she sees a lot of herself in Cass, or thinks
yeah,
Cass could be what she is, and Cass is like holding back. But again, like Cass didn't even meet her mother until she was like, I don't know how old she was at that time, but like
yeah,
late teens. Um, and Shiva, like the Shiva before she gave birth to Cass, if you like, it's interesting because the character does is different.
yeah,
So I wanted like, so like they both developed so much before they had a relationship with each other. Obviously Shiva, but Cass became who she is before she knew her mother. But then as soon as her mother entered her life in that original run, um, Shiva's shadow is like over her for the rest of the
yeah.
series. Like there's like the 1 year later, like the build up to them having a rematch. Like it's such a definitive um relationship in Cass's life. And I find it so fascinating that Shiva, I think also for Shiva, is like as soon as she found Cass and Cass entered her life, suddenly Shiva's orbit started revolving around her daughter more. even though she's supposed to have like reached enlightenment, she's supposed to have like let go of all this stuff. Something about Cass, like she keeps coming back to her daughter. So clearly there's just so
Yeah.
much unsettled there. So yeah, those preconceptions, they both have each other. I wanted to immediately jump into that. Because I feel like we all have that with our parents. We think we know
Yes.
our parents too. And then suddenly we see our parents through other people's eyes, or like we hear things, or like you don't see this side of your parents because you have this relationship already. And the same goes both ways. Like I know, I'm sure my parents have some idea of me, but as soon as they see me in like a different context, or like how I live my life day to day, in like this other city now that I live away from them, like I'm sure it also challenges their preconceptions of who I am. So I just like immediately just wanted to dive into that.
And it's done so well, and I love the fact that as soon as you start feeling like we're about to maybe make some emotional connections or we're about to take some steps in that relationship, something will happen that will cause some kind of badass fight scene to just cut right through that. And so in this issue too, it's the introduction of Calden, the
Mm,
unseen, and you are kind of you're revealing a little bit more about the unburied, and we're meeting Calden, who is this very big presence on the page that, as you know, as Cass says, she sees fear in her mother for even just a split second. Obviously, do not want to get into spoiler territory, but can you talk a little bit around fleshing out their backstory in this issue and who Calden is?
yeah, so I am kind of slow dripping information of who the
Mm,
Unburied is, and like why they're after Shiva, why they're kind of sending all their forces to take these people out. But I wanted to immediately introduce Kaladin as like their kind of like leader, or like the big
yeah.
character, because and just show the threat of these people, because I know like, oh, a horde of ninjas, like just keep beating them up, and like how big of a threat is that? I was like, yeah, those are the grunts, but like there's members of the
Yeah.
Unburied who are terrifying, even to someone like Lady Shiva. Um, and I wanted to introduce someone who has that big presence. Like he's not like a loud, boisterous person, but he's just
Mhm.
so good at what he does. He like speaks kind of quietly. He's kind of like he just, but like the confident, the way Takeshi draws him, like he just takes over any scene he's in.
Yeah.
And I want him, and he doesn't describe much, but he does talk about like what he's doing is for his people,
Yeah.
and for his, I get like his people, his family. So like I needed an antagonist who's like also fighting for like whatever the Unburied are fighting for, but it's familial, it's for his people, versus like Cass and Shiva, who are also at this point fighting for their own lives and should be fighting for each other's lives if they get to some point of reconciliation on that. Um, but I wanted to set this all up to be about kind of these warring, just those familial bonds, like we were fighting for
Yeah.
ourselves and our people. And we'll find more about Calvin and why, like why the Unburied are doing this. But yeah, I needed Calvin to have a big presence, and Takeshi's design is just so incredible. I'm like, this is the coolest, one of the coolest men I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel really good about him.
I have the very last page, which is a pretty striking image of Calden, just up on my other screen. He's just sort of staring at me to my
Yeah,
right to my right.
sweet, not
Um,
intimidating at all.
Not at all. I am completely on your side when it comes to the slow drip. I love a slow drip story. I think it's really rewarding. Um, and again, I do not want to try and goad you into any kind of spoiler, but from a kind of writer's perspective, what I do find really interesting to kind of ask about and to hear about is how you as a writer go about trying to still give us some information. So, you know, we do learn a fair amount about the group in this issue, but not enough that it reveals everything. How do you as a
Mm.
writer kind of find that balance where you're like, right, I need to keep people on board. I need to keep driving the narrative forwards, but I don't want to reveal everything yet. How do you do that? How do you do that and
I
make it work?
I think a lot of it is like, when in the story will this piece of information have the biggest impact?
Mm,
And then those are like the touchstones you go towards.
yeah.
Because I could come out and be like, well, here's the whole reason they're trying to kill Shiva in issue
Yeah.
two. And you're like, okay, well, we still have four more issues. So
Yeah. Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
we want to at least have some mystery. Um, and for this, yeah, I think that's like the big one. It's just having those big touchstones of when you want that twist of more information coming. Um, yeah, it was difficult to kind of figure that out, but I hope it's like working at least a bit to kind of keep people at least invested in figuring out what's going on with the Unburied, why Shiva is doing this. I also love I love having my protagonist like discover information at the same
Yes.
time as the reader. And like
Yes.
it's and Cass, the whole point of what Cass, she doesn't know all the information. And I love
Yep.
how she's kind of just thrown into all this. And I love that it's more about, is she willing to fight for her mother even if she doesn't know why, or like
Yeah.
what these people could be like. Maybe Shiva does deserve to be killed by these people, but should she stand up for her mother because it's her mom? Or and there's
Mm.
also the threat of like, these people aren't just going to kill you, Cass, they're going to kill your whole family. So it's just, I want that to be the core
Yeah.
of Cass's conflict right now, and
Yeah.
then it'll just get messier as more is revealed, but it'll be great.
But then I think a really important part of that as well is the fact that Cass, and again, this is really core to what's in issue two with Barbau, is she's never had a support cast before. Even when you go back to that original run, a lot of it is centered on seeing Batman or seeing Barbara or seeing the other members of the Bat family that she's around. And what you've got here is the chance to really develop a world around Cass that's for Cass, that
Mm.
is the corner of, for now, Gotham, which obviously will be kind of moving away from this point onwards. But you have this chance to build out Cass's world, which we've never really spent all that much time in with her. It's always been her as a supporting player to someone else, or in Batgirls when it was the three of them all together and what was their supporting cast like as a group. So again, I wanted to just dig into how are you building out Cass's world, because I feel like what again works so well in issue two is where we find her at the end of the issue is really kind of driven home because you've had time to establish Bao and the boys in the restaurant and learn a little bit about how Cass functions, which we learn through, at the same time as Shiva. So just wanted to ask you about that and building that world. What's that been like and how have you approached it?
Yeah, a big mission of mine going into the book, and which was part of my original pitch for writing this, was like, I want Cass to have her own part of Gotham, even if we're not
Yeah.
there for long. I want to show that, I want to just develop a supporting cast that is hers alone.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and eventually, yeah, like more and more characters will become kind of with Cass. She'll get her own like proper villains. Because I just wanted to prove that like this character is strong enough to kind
Yeah,
of shoulder an entire supporting cast, an entire like villain, like a rogues gallery if we let her. Like I
yeah,
want her, like she could do that, like just like Nightwing can. Like she doesn't need to be just associated with Batman and Bruce and like all the other siblings. And a big part of that was like fleshing out the people who aren't like superhero characters. Like she exists in
mm,
Gotham, has contacts in Gotham that maybe the others don't even know about. But
yeah,
she's going around and like, I want, so that's why I wanted her to have Babao, because I love the idea of her kind of, she doesn't have much to give people, Cass. Like she can
mm,
protect people. Um, but something she can give is like what her strengths are, which is like she can teach people to fight.
yeah,
So I wanted her to be like, I feel like she would seek out people who needed just to learn self-defense or
yeah,
anything like around Gotham. So like she found this family. She loves Babao's cooking, and she's like, what can I give back to Babao? And she's like, I can help train her grandsons, since Babao's gotten older and can't teach them
yeah,
herself as much anymore. So I really wanted to establish that, and like, and if she has a supporting cast, I don't know. I love the idea of Cass just loving food. So I'm like, I want her to be like with this
yeah,
like in this restaurant setting, and I want her to have this. I don't know. I just love the idea of her teaching what she knows to people, and
yeah,
that's how she gives back. And a big part of it was like Shiva's trying to get Cass out of Gotham, and she's like, I'm not leaving Gotham. I'm not leaving my people. And
yeah.
we see why she doesn't want to leave them. She has these connections, which just complicates things as the story goes on.
And yeah, it feels organically cast to me as well. The way it's written, that feels like what Cass would do based on what I know of her from,
Mm,
the 20 years this character has been around. Um,
mm-hmm.
and finally, we do get to see her without her mask in
I know.
two. And again, what I mean, yeah, Takeshi, incredible, incredible panel. Um,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I feel like looking at that panel, her eyes are like burning into my soul. She
It's
is
I know.
so
It's
Oh,
heartrending, yeah.
yeah. What was it like seeing that moment on the page for the first time when that artwork came in?
I know, because it's funny, because I heard a lot of people issue one were just like, "Oh, we still haven't seen her maskless yet." So I knew like issue two had already been like written and like
Yeah.
mostly drawn, of course, or like all drawn. But yeah, that maskless reveal is probably like the most heartrending version of doing that, where it's like we haven't shown her
Yeah.
without a mask, and then this is how we do it. But yeah, I that came in, and I knew it was gonna be in a, I wrote it. I was like, this is heartbreaking. Like this is
Mm.
the worst case scenario for Cass. Like she didn't want this. Um, and the cherry on top being like the bat symbol. I'm like
Yes.
she, and she's being taken away from all of it.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, it was just I don't know. It's so beautiful. Takeshi's just like killing it because he can do the action scenes so well, and then he
Yeah.
also can hit these the character acting, like the stuff with Ba Bao, like half, like most of the reason you immediately love her is just like his acting with, like his character direction with her. And so he hits the heartfelt scenes. He draws the perfect Shiva. Like I'm obsessed with how he Shiva as well. So he's killing it. He's so good.
I realize I'm beaming because I'm just thinking I can see it in my head as I'm talking about it. Um, and so in that moment, Shiva has her arm around her daughter as well, which is kind of a first as well. We're really flipping the relationship now, and it feels like she really needs her mother at this point, which is interesting and different. And we've got a new status quo again coming out of this issue. So before we wrap up, what can you tease about what is coming next, or where we are going in this?
Um, I know it might seem like Cass is letting Shiva take control a bit, but she is not yet ready to let her mom take over her life. She's not happy with how the end of that issue happened. Um, and for many reasons, some of it
Yeah,
having to do with her mother, and obviously she probably blames herself for a lot of it. So
yeah,
the next moving forward, it's like a lot of what happened at the end of issue two emotionally kind of carries over through the next issue. And then the heart of the issue, the heart of the first arc is still like, can she trust her mother? Like, why?
yeah,
Like, what is happening? Why are they so hell bent on taking out her and her mother? And can
yeah.
she trust her mother? Like, is she willing to trust her mother? Is like a big thing going forward. Yeah, and a lot more action. Issue three has the craziest action sequence I have seen in comics in a long time, and I knew it was ambitious when I wrote it. And
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Takeshi just went. I don't know. He killed it. It's incredible. I can't wait for people to see
Oh, okay. Now I'm excited. Well, I'm already excited, but now I'm even more excited to read the next one. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I was so excited when they reached out and said, "Did I want to sit down with you to talk about this book?" Because she is a character I love. This is a book that
it.
I have loved both issues. So thank you so much.
Cool. No, thank you so much. I'm so happy you're loving it so much. And it was just great to chat. Thank you.
Thank you. If you couldn't tell, I was quite excited to be sitting down with Tate to talk about Batgirl. Cassandra Cain is a character that I have loved for a long, long time. Ever since I first read the No Man's Land books, I think that was my first time ever experiencing her character, and I have obviously read her solo run. I have read Batgirls. I am a fan. I would call the Batgirl character probably my second favorite character in comics, next to Batman. Well, I don't know. She's on a similar level to Nightwing. But it was so cool to just sit down and get to talk to Tate, because it's not only is it great to have Cass back in a solo series, but it's just so great to see her written by someone who understands the character and really wants to do right by her at the same time. The second issue itself really steps up everything that we've seen already, so if you read the first one and you enjoyed it, there's so much more to dig into in issue 2. We're learning a lot about the Unburied. We're meeting, I don't want to call him their leader, because as we talked about there, he might not necessarily be that character, but is for now. We're meeting some villains. We're really setting up the world around Cass. Things are moving at a pretty heavy pace at this point, so it's really fun. It's an absolutely wonderful read, and it really is a love letter to the character and her relationships, and is working so hard to give her the kind of agency and I guess the life that other characters like Nightwing, like Barbara Gordon's Batgirl, like any of the Robins have within the world of Gotham and the Bat family. So hopefully by the time we get to the end of this arc, firstly this series will continue even further, but also we'll really see Cass have come into her own and become a great standalone character in her own right. If you enjoyed this interview, then you can actually watch it in full. We did record the video and you can watch it over on our YouTube channel. Just head over to youtube.com and search Get Your Comic On, or you can check it out via our website, which is www.getyourcomiccon.co.uk. I would love to know what you think of the Batgirl series so far, so please do find me on social media. I'm at Neil Vag on all major platforms. Or you can find us at Get Your Comic On Instagram and B-Sky and Threads and all those places, or at Get Your Comic On 1 on X if you happen to still be using it. I'll be back very soon with more from the podcast, but all will be revealed very, very soon. Until then, stay safe, stay well, enjoy Batgirl, and I'll see you soon. Bye!